Hi, in this video we will show you how to utilize Omega 365 cost management.
And cost management is about having control of the costs related to a project. This includes planning of when it is expected that the costs will come, what the actual costs are, what you have achieved for the money you've used, and where you're headed. So the cost management module in Omega 365 give a structured overview of the costs throughout the whole process.
Yeah, and this illustration shows the main process that one goes through in Omega 365 for cost management. First, you need to set up the project, then you need to get in the estimate, time-phase estimate, set your baseline, and then follow up the contracts and the actual cost and progress, manage changes, update the forecast, and of course be able to report to the different stakeholders of the project. So the first thing you will do is to get in the project.
And the project is a part of the organization structure. So in the setup phase, you will therefore have to set up the project first, where also access and roles are inherited. You may also have some project-specific information to register, such as start and end dates, cutoffs, and phases.
The next step is then to set up the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is an hierarchic structure representing the work to be done, and it's essential also to identify the lowest level of the work breakdown structure, typically referred to as a work package. That's where one integrates cost and schedule information. So you can have multiple activities tied to a work package, and you can have multiple estimates that are independent of the activities that are also tied to a work package. At the work package, this information is integrated, so you can report actual progress, actual cost, planned progress, planned cost, etc. at the work package level, and then aggregate that in the work breakdown structure. And when you have got in place the work breakdown structure, you're ready to get in the estimate. And the estimate could be coming from Omega 365 estimating tool, or it could be from other sources. We could import it from, for example, modules that we use in Omega 365, for example, resource management. And eventually, when you have awarded the contracts and have more information about the contracts, you can use that as a source. And you can utilize external tools for estimating and just import it from those tools.
So when the estimates are registered, the next step is to time phase the estimates. In Omega 365, there are several options for time phasing the estimates, where you can, for example, use predefined standard profiles, and it can be calculated from the resource plan, activities, or from the cost plan that the contractor has delivered. You can choose to time phase the VBS one by one, or you can update all or several at once.
Yes, and when you have in place your WBS, your estimates, and you have time phases, then you can set this as your baseline. So when you have set your baseline, you are able to eventually get out reports like this. This black thicker line up here is the baseline, and the development of this, the total estimate. You can see it's been increased a couple of times. So we store the different baselines, making it possible for you to report against these different baselines. And the blue line is the time-phased cost of this baseline. The dotted line here is the forecast, and then you have the actual cost, earned value, etc.
In the contract register in Omega 365, you have an overview of all contracts and the changes related to these. Contracts are also part of the organization structure, and since all data in the solution are linked to an organization unit, you will here in the contract register have a good overview of both costs and other information linked to the contracts.
Yes, and here we see this basic engineering contract, and in this case we only have one contract element, that's the original contract. And that's again broken down into WS so that we have the possibility to report also the committed amount against the WBS. And then you will eventually start getting in actual cost and progress, and that is reported in this screen, where you can register actual cost directly in here, or you can utilize input from the contractors, because the contractors can also be given access and report their actual cost and progress directly in the solution. You can choose to use that information directly, or you can override it. It's also possible to import from external sources, like for example timesheet system for getting actual cost for resources working on a project. It could be from Primavera or other planning system to get in the actual progress, for example.
When it comes to managing changes in Omega 365, we differ between two main categories, which is the project change register and the contract changes.
Yes, and here we have an example of a project change register. You have the different changes that have been identified, the severity, which step in the process they are at, and potentially the cost associated with it. So we have a little look at this one. You will see on the right-hand side the workflow process that it's going through. So here we're utilizing Omega 365's workflow engine. And you will also see that we have the cost associated with this change. It could also be possible here to say which WS this cost funding comes from. Like in this case, it's drawn from the contingency WS. And then we also have the contract changes. Looking at this engineering contract, you'll see that we had an original contract first, then there was a variation order, we have variation order requests, and potentially other types of changes related to a contract. And also here the contractors can work in the system, so they can issue variation order requests from the solution, and then it's potentially approved by the client, and the client is potentially then issuing a variation order. And the same thing here with these changes, they are also then tied to the WBS element, so that you have both the committed and the contractual forecast based on these potential changes against the WS. Because the next thing is then to be able to provide most realistic forecast as possible, and utilizing the information that you have on the contract is very central there, but it's also possible to utilize other information. So for example, the CPI, the cost performance index, and the schedule performance index may be utilized. That's based on earned value methodology. So if you report actual progress, and you have of course your actual cost, that is then calculating the CPI. So you can utilize this information, and the cost controller will then potentially update the forecast, the total forecast, or forecast at complete. We have different types of reports in the solution. Like here we have a cost status report. The WS is central here, showing the periodic values, cumulative values, total this year, year to date, etc. We have cost curves, as we've shown already. You can navigate here in the WS structure and see the total cost curve for the project. We can see the data behind the chart. We have pivots that gives you a lot of flexibility. In here you will see that we are at the portfolio level. So you have the possibility, since a project is part of the organization structure, and we can select an org unit higher up in the organization structure at the portfolio level, for example, and then you will be able to see the cost aggregated to this portfolio, and then drill down into the project and into the WS structure. We can also use other metadata in this case, for example, different cost codes that you have defined, country codes, etc. These metadata you can configure per solution. And we have status presentations that can be generated. A status presentation is a PowerPoint where you can utilize the corporate template so that you have a good PowerPoint template as a basis, combining that with actual information from the solution. So we put in placeholders in that PowerPoint, which will then pick data from the solution. Like here we have text inputs that is shown, we have key numbers coming from the solution, we have cost curve, we can have progress curves, risk matrix, etc. So this was an introduction to Omega 365 cost management. If you want to learn more about our products, check out omega365.com.